Namaskar. This is our last week. This week topic is recent trends and directions in positive psychology. This week I will focus more on positive psychology in India, which is mixture of positive psychology and Indian psychology, and I will support my points with various researches conducted by our group. If we just talk about positive psychology in India, I think if we divide in subsections, then there could be 4 subsections. Number 1, to study positive psychology constructs. If you could recall, we had 3 objectives of positive psychology. Number 1, identifying, amplifying and concentrating on the character strengths and can say positive personality traits. In this section, our focus is on identification and description of character strengths, correlation among them. Sometimes we can design study as per cause and effect studies as well as mediating effects in certain studies we document. For example, in one of our research, we focused on how emotional intelligence is mediating between personality and happiness. If we just count another field or another domain which is very important to study, that is psychological testing on positive psychological constructs. It match with second objective, need to measure reliably and validly these strengths. And in this section, I will discuss number of test construction studies, test adaptation, test revalidation and overall view of how do we translate psychological test, how do we adapt, how do we revalidate. Here second section is psychological testing on positive psychological constructs. You could recall the second objective of positive psychology was need to measure reliably and validly these strengths. In this section, I will discuss about test construction, test adaptation, test revalidation and various studies on all those aspects. Along with all those studies, scales for Indian psychological constructs would be discussed in this section. Third one which is unique here is review of ancient Indian literature and how constructs from Indian psychology help us to understand human behavior. There are various constructs like Anasakti, Sachidanand, Trigunas, Vikaras which may help us to understand human behavior, and in this section I will discuss about all those. Fourth one, as you know, that is interventions, and third objective of positive psychology was develop and test interventions to build these strengths. And first one, which is traditional one, deliberately delivered modules or can say positive psychology intervention programs. There are hundreds of programs in positive psychology nowadays which are claiming that we can improve well-being as well as resilience, flow and several other positive psychological constructs through these programs. Second, which is unique here, is that to identify existing socio-cultural issues which facilitate and hinder our well-being and reinforce these facilitating factors through intervention programs. So, broadly we want to know socio-cultural factors which may have significant impact on our well-being. If these are hindering variables or obstacles for our well-being, then we could think how these can be removed, how these can be reduced so that we can program to grow and we can have progress for our well-being. On the other hand, we can identify certain factors which I will discuss in this section which are facilitating factors. So, how these factors could facilitate our well-being and can highlight those factors because they are helping us to have higher level of happiness. So, all those socio-cultural factors I will discuss in this section. When we say Indian psychology, that is mixture of positive psychology objectives as well as Indian psychology objectives. For example, to identify positive personality traits or character strengths. So, our identification mainly in positive psychology is mainstream constructs like hope, optimism, flow, mindfulness and various other factors which we have discussed in this course. Along with all these, our focus is on Indian psychological constructs also. For example, Anasakti, Satchidanand, Sukh, Dukh, Vikaras or various other factors could be there which help us to understand human behavior. So, in this section I will discuss about all those factors also. When we say assessment, one which is scales available on all positive psychology constructs like flow scale, resilience scale, optimism scale, a hope scale. Along with all these scales, there could be some scales on Indian constructs like Satchidanand scale, a Vedic personality scale, Vikara scale, Ashtanga Yoga scale. So, I will discuss about all those Indian constructs scales also. When we say third objective, that is interventions. So, we know deliberately delivered intervention programs or can say intervention programs in positive psychology well established. But along with these, there are some scholars who have identified lay strategies to improve well-being. They asked people, what do you think, which activities would improve your well-being? And then they identify all those activities which are highlighted by them, and then they documented those strategies. So, I will discuss about those strategies also. And religious spiritual practices are quite common in India, and there are some programs which I think informally seems to improve our well-being as well as health, physical as well as psychological. And I will discuss certain programs which we have tested, which are from religious spiritual platform, and we studied their effectiveness and observed that even these programs are really good to improve our well-being as well as our health. So, I will discuss about those programs also. Let us take one by one. Our first objective was to study positive psychology constructs. Under this category, we will discuss about correlates, predictors, cause and effects of mental health, happiness, well-being, especially in Indian setting. Here in this section, I am talking about mental health, happiness, well-being in terms of synonymous or interchangeable terms these are, which we are using generally in positive psychology studies, and we do not focus much on from which particular theory or model these are, because in each research first of all we talk about operational definition only. So, these mental health, happiness, well-being, these terms have been changed interchangeably here. And second is how psychosocial and socio-demographic factors affect mental health and well-being. I think now you understand all these things, and you know there could be various models of well-being as you have studied it in happiness chapter. Happiness could be overall happiness, it could be subjective well-being which is combination of life satisfaction and positive emotions, it could be psychological well-being model in a particular study in which autonomy, positive relations, environmental mastery, self-acceptance, purpose in life and personal growth are the factors of psychological well-being. There are some other studies in which they have focused on mental health model, and in this case emotional well-being, psychological well-being and social well-being were the main factors. PERMA model, you know about it, that is combination of positive emotions, engagement, relationships and accomplishment, that is achievement. Quality of life and personal well-being models also we have used in our researches. Quality of life, it includes physical health, psychological well-being, social relationships and environmental conditions. On the other hand, personal well-being, it is combination of 7 factors: standard of living, health, life achievement, personal relationships, personal safety, feeling part of a community and future security. I think along with all, you know, in psychological testing broadly we use Likert scale. That could be 5-point Likert scale, that could be 7-point Likert scale or maybe 10-11, and we just at very previous stage we convert your behavior in numbers. For example, by considering overall view of happiness, what is your score and what is your status at the scale of 0 to 10. So, when you are saying say 7, it means we have converted your behavior in numbers, and then we do statistical analysis, and by using rigorous or very scientific or higher level of statistics, we have certain prediction about group's behavior and we work on averages. So, by considering all these things, we have conducted various researches. Let us start with some of these researches, so that you can understand how do we do research, number one, and what are our findings from Indian researches. So, first research is on correlates and predictors of mental health. This research was correlates and predictors of positive mental health for school going children, and we did it in 2015. The relationship between positive mental health and well-being was examined in 604 North Indian high school and secondary high school going children, and their age was 11 to 18 years. The study employed various scales such as mental health continuum. We had for studying mental health and its three dimensions: emotional, psychological and social well-being. We had scale related to positive negative experiences, flourishing scale. We had World Health Organization quality of life scale. This talk about 4 domains. Personal well-being scales we used in this study. Mental health was predicted variable, and various predictors were used like positive negative experiences, flourishing, quality of life and its domains, personal well-being. Positive mental health was found positively correlated with positive experiences, personal well-being, flourishing and all domains of quality of life. These are physical health, psychological well-being, social relationships and environmental health, and negatively correlated with negative experiences. Well-being measured of flourishing, positive and negative experiences, all 4 domains of quality of life significantly predicted children's positive mental health, and percentage of variance was 49%, and its dimensions like emotional well-being shared 41% of variance, social well-being 24% of variance and psychological well-being 47% of variance. So, we can say mental health and various other well-being indicators are highly correlated with each other, as well as they share certain percentage of variance and connected with each other to some extent, we can say. Our second research was mental health and psychosocial functioning in adolescents, an investigation among Indian students from Delhi. The present research focused on positive mental health of Indian adolescents within the mental health continuum model. Aims were to estimate their prevalence of mental health and to examine its associations with mental distress and psychosocial functioning, taking into account their age and gender. A group of 539 students, their age was 13 to 11 years and 43.2% were girls and remaining were boys. They were selected from Delhi NCR, and they completed 3 scales: mental health continuum, depression, anxiety, stress scale, and third was strengths and difficulties questionnaire, in which we have 2 factors: one positive on strengths and second negative on difficulties. In this research, we observed various findings. I think now you could easily recall this model. In this model, we converted their score in 3 categories: flourishing, moderate and languishing. Flourishing means almost every day or every day. It means on positive items, if person has quite high score, at least 1 out of 3 emotional well-being and 6 out of 11 positive functioning items, then this child is flourishing. On the other hand, if person is saying never or once or twice on positive items of well-being or mental health, at least 1 at emotional well-being and 6 positive functioning out of 11 again, then this child is languishing. So, by considering this model, we converted their data in 3 categories: flourishing, moderating and languishing, and it was observed that 46.4% participants were flourishing, 51.2% were moderately mentally healthy and only 2.4% were languishing. However, these results should not be generalized to Indian population, because these students were from private schools only and from Delhi NCR, and if we just collect more data and take into account some more demographic variables, then our results may be different, and we should understand these results as per these demographic variables. Second very important finding we observed here, a higher number of girls and younger adolescents were flourishing compared to boys and older adolescents. You would find these findings have been strengthened in next researches also. Moreover, flourishing participants reported lower prevalence of depression and adjustment difficulties, and they had more pro-social behavior. In another research, we focused on demographic variables, and demographic variables and happiness and related factors was the main motto in next 2-3 studies. So, first of all, factor affecting mental health of North Indian adolescents. The study explored the different factors that affect mental health of adolescents. In this study, we collected data on 1,209 adolescents, and out of them 591 adolescents responded in English and 618 adolescents responded in Hindi. So, they had language choice, whichever language they prefer. About 1089 adolescents were attending school and 120 adolescents were school dropouts, because we wanted to study schooling versus dropout students. In the current study, original 3-factor structure of Hindi translated mental health continuum was confirmed. The measurement invariance results indicated that scale is a valid scale in English and Hindi languages. I will discuss this section in next part of this lecture, but still I think you should understand that if we are using 2 languages for a scale, then first of all we must be assured that these 2 languages scales working properly, as well as this adapted or translated scale is same as per English language responses, and in both data sets original 3-factor structures were confirmed, which we confirmed through statistical analysis. Multivariate results indicated role of age, gender, schooling, locality and various other factors. Let us discuss one by one. When we observed age, we divided it in 3 sections: early age 13 to 14 years, middle age 15 to 16 years and late 17 to 19 years. We observed that early adolescents were significantly higher than the middle and the adolescents on all domains on total score of MHC. So, it has been observed that younger group 13 to 14 had better score on mental health as well as on emotional, social and psychological well-being. Gender wise, it has been observed that social well-being of females was higher as compared to the males. Type of schooling, the results indicated that participants who attended private schools, they had better mental health as well as higher score on emotional, social and psychological well-being as compared to who attended government schools. Place of residence was also significant variable when we compared their data in terms of urban and rural. The results indicated that participants who resided in rural areas, they had better or higher mean scores as compared to adolescents who resided in urban areas. Ability to express thoughts and opinion in front of parents, presence of relaxed environment at home and satisfaction with dressing style affected adolescents' mental health. In this study, we also observed that adolescents attending school displayed better mental health than dropouts. Adolescents who were attending schools had higher mean on social well-being and the total score of mental health compared to school dropouts. So, we can say school dropouts student had poorer mental health as well as social well-being compared to school attending students. In our another study which was on personal well-being, we had similar kind of results. and this topic was effect of the demographic variables and psychometric properties of the personal well-being. Because we use these scales first time, and before that we could not observe the person who have studied their psychometric properties in Indian setting. So, in all our researches or a series of researches which I am discussing with you here, first of all we reported the scales psychometric properties in Hindi, in English, and even we have joint data set English as well as Hindi, and most of the time we observed that results are in favorable conditions. You know about personal well-being. This personal well-being is combination of various factors: standard of living, personal health, life achievement, personal relationships, personal safety, community connectedness and future security. And they had one more question on overall happiness level. The study aimed at validating psychometric properties for the English and the Hindi translated version of this scale, as I discussed earlier also. For that purposes, we had 1301 students data, and their age range was 13 to 18 years with the mean 15.40 and standard deviation 1.33. The English and Hindi version confirmed one factor solution of the personal well-being scale. The effect of demographic variables on different domains of personal well-being indicated that adolescents who resided in rural areas and those who attended private schools possessed a significantly higher score on personal well-being. Well-being declined as age increased from early adolescents, that was 13 to 15 years, to late adolescents. So, the result of this study are in agreement with the previous literature. In this series, our next research is validation and effect of demographic variables on perceived quality of life by adolescents. So, the objectives of the current study were to examine the psychometric properties of the scale, as I have been discussing in previous studies also, and then role of demographic variables on quality of life. Data from 1327 students we had, and their age range was 11 to 21 years, their average 15.36 and standard deviation 1.42 years. Results of multivariate analysis demonstrated that adolescents differed significantly on demographic variables, which is strengthened our previous findings. Adolescents who attended a private school possessed significantly better quality of life overall view, as well as on physical health, on psychological well-being and environmental conditions as compared to adolescents who attended government schools. Rural adolescents had significantly higher perceived quality of life, physical health, psychological well-being, social relationship and environmental conditions as compared to urban adolescents. Aligning with present findings, there are various other findings which are supporting our results, like Freeman and his associates in 2001 reported that well-being and belongingness was higher in rural adolescents as compared to their urban counterparts. Sharma and Gulhati in 2012 found that despite living in impoverished conditions, rural adolescents perceived higher level of happiness. They also found that female adolescents perceived more happiness as compared to male adolescents. So, all these researches showing importance of demographic variables, and we could conclude that all of the above mentioned studies support role of socio-demographic variables, and when we are doing research as well as preparing intervention modules, we should take into account socio-demographic variables. Now, another section in this domain is to study association between Indian psychological constructs and mainstream psychological constructs. To some extent, we should understand that how Indian constructs or Indian explanations of certain factors is correlated with the mainstream of psychological constructs. For strengthening this point, I have selected 2-3 studies in this direction. Study number 1 is relationship between 3 guna theory and well-being indicators. The present study examined the relationship between gunas. Gunas means three factors. I think now you know. So, this three guna theory includes these three factors: sattva, rajas and tamas. And what is the correlation between these gunas and well-being indicators such as psychological capital, personality, the big five, life satisfaction and subjective happiness. This study is conducted on two sample sets. The first sample consisted of 80 Indian professionals, 51 males and 29 females with age range 28.8 years and standard deviation 7.19. On the other hand, another group 110 students, out of them 82 were males and 28 were females. Their mean age was 21 years and standard deviation 2.72. This group administered only Vedic personality inventory and mental health continuum. On the other hand, the first group, they administered Vedic personality inventory, mental health continuum, and along with these two scales, they had psychological capital questionnaire and big five personality. So, let us see their results. Results are really interesting, and these results are important for us to understand, so that we can understand how Indian constructs could be correlated with the mainstream psychology variables, factors or constructs. So, if we just see sattva, rajas and tamas, how these are correlated with each other. We could observe here rajas is not correlated with sattva, but tamas is negatively correlated with sattvic style and positively with rajasic style. So, to some extent we can say rajasic and tamasic have been observed negative factors and sattvic style is positive factor. And let us see then how it is correlated with psychological capital and its four factors. I think now you know these four factors are efficacy, hope, resilience and optimism. Here you could see sattva guna and psychological capital are positively correlated with each other, except fourth. Fourth is resilience, that is not significantly correlated, but all other factors are significantly positively correlated with sattva guna. On the other hand, rajas and tamas, these are in direction negative, but these are not correlated significantly with the psychological capital and its factors. When we compare with mental health continuum and its three dimensions, these are emotional well-being, social well-being and psychological well-being, then sattva guna is positively correlated with mental health as well as with its dimensions. On the other hand, rajas and tamas both, these are correlated but in negative direction. On the other hand, when we talk about Vedic personality versus the big five factors personality, extraversion is positively correlated with sattva guna only. On the other hand, all other factors like agreeableness positively correlated with the sattva guna, but negatively correlated with the rajas and tamas. Similarly, conscientiousness positively correlated with sattvic style, but negatively correlated with rajasic and tamasic style. And openness to experiences, sattvic style or sattva gunas positively correlated, but rajas and tamas negatively correlated. On the other hand, neuroticism, you know, that is emotional instability broadly. So, that is negatively correlated with sattvic style. On the other hand, positively correlated with rajasic and tamasic. So, broadly as per this model, we can say sattvic gunas is positively correlated with positive traits, on the other hand negatively correlated with the negative traits. On the other hand, rajas and tamas seems negative constructs, and they are negatively correlated with positive constructs of mainstream and positively correlated with negative constructs like neuroticism. So, to some extent we could connect Indian theories or Indian models with mainstream of positive psychology or psychology constructs. Similarly, on another data set, it's clear here that Sattvic style is negatively correlated with the Rajasic and Tamasic gunas, and Rajasic is positively correlated with Tamasic style. On the other hand, all of them are correlated with well-being factors like that's MHC, subjective well-being, and life satisfaction. So, all these well-being indicators are positively correlated with Sattvic gunas. On the other hand, with Rajasic and Tamasic, all of them are significantly correlated except social well-being with Rajasic style. These are correlated, but we have negative correlation between these Rajasic and Tamasic and well-being indicators. So, to some extent, this Indian theory or Indian explanation of personality has its connections with the mainstream psychology constructs. From this research, we concluded that across both studies, Sattva was found to be positively correlated with well-being, Rajas and Tamas were negatively correlated with well-being. Higher level of Sattva and well-being were reported in the older age group. Males scored higher on Rajas, while no gender differences were found in well-being. Similarly, we did another study, which was on cross-cultural differences on gunas and other well-being dimensions. The current study investigated triadic gunas and well-being dimensions across 3 nations. In these 3 nations, we collected data from India, 493 participants with the 194 males and 299 females. You could see their mean age was 21.73 and SD 3.23 of this age group. We collected data from USA also, and number of participants was 302. Out of them 80 males and 222 females were there. Their mean age was 22.90 years with 2.78 standard deviation. Collected data from Czech Republic, European country, and this data was 353, 67 males and 286 females. Their mean age was 22.29 years and standard deviation 2.29. So, total 1148 participants data we collected. Triguna personality, Vedic personality inventory, now you know, which is developed by Wolf in 1999, and well-being dimensions measured by mental health continuum, by flourishing scale, positive and negative experiences scale. These scales were used in this study. Triguna were correlated with the mental health and its clusters, emotional, social and psychological well-being with the flourishing as well as positive negative experiences. As the objective of the study was to explore the effect of personality, that is three gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, on well-being. Regression analysis revealed that 3 gunas accounted significantly for well-being dimensions. The results indicated that Sattva accounted for about 48% variance in Czechs and predicted by emotional well-being, psychological well-being and flourishing. 56% in Indians, which is predicted by emotional well-being, social well-being, psychological well-being, flourishing and positive experiences, and about 55% variance in Americans predicted by psychological well-being, flourishing and positive experiences. On the other hand, Rajas accounted for about 21% variance in Czechs, and that was predicted by flourishing and negative experiences. 8% variance in Indians, which is predicted by social well-being and negative experiences, and 54% variance in Americans, which was predicted by positive and negative experiences. A total of 50% of variance accounted for Tamas in Czechs, so predicted by psychological well-being, flourishing and negative experiences. 20% variance in Indians, which was predicted by social well-being, psychological well-being, flourishing and negative experiences, and 64% variance in Americans, which was predicted by social well-being, flourishing, positive experiences and negative experiences. Thus, the results reinforce that Triguna's personality significantly accounted for well-being dimensions, not only in India, but in other countries also. And this way, we could do some cross-cultural researches and understand behavior not only in Indian setting, but in other settings also, how such kind of studies reporting results. In this series, second topic is psychological testing on positive psychological constructs. In this section, I will discuss test construction, test adaptation, test revalidation, skills for Indian psychological constructs. I think now you know, we have covered this section earlier also. When I am saying test construction, then it covers various steps. First of all, we define construct, what is operational definition of it, and then write items to reflect construct. There should be clear cut connection between operational definition here and the items which we have generated. Then collect data, perform item analysis, and then revise items as per our results. Some items are selected here and others may be rejected because of poor item analysis. Then we collect new data sets on newly developed items, and then again we do item analysis, mean, standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis, item total correlation, alpha reliability if item is deleted, and various other parameters we use. And then we do exploratory as well as confirmatory factor analysis. Exploratory factor analysis means when we are exploring what factor solution would be best suitable. On the other hand, in confirmatory factor analysis, our objective is to confirm previously explored factor analysis. So, here our approach is totally different, which I will discuss once again in next slides. And then finally, test is developed. So, by following this procedure, we have developed various scales in our book Measures of Positive Psychology, which is published with Springer in 2016. And we have developed by using rigorous statistical techniques these scales in Hindi as well as in English. So, if some of you are researchers and want to have scales in Hindi or in English in Indian setting, most welcome, you just write to us, we could provide these scales to you. We developed scale on flow, on resilience, on mindfulness, on spirituality, on well-being, as well as one scale which has combination of intra and interpersonal character strengths. In 2010, we published another research on positive personality traits questionnaires. This is again new questionnaire which we developed here in Indian setting, and main point of this positive personality trait questionnaire is, first of all, we did qualitative research. From this qualitative research, we observed that how people are identifying character strengths, and then we developed questions for this scale, positive personality trait questionnaire PPTQ, and then we studied psychometric properties or established scale on PPTQ. So, these are the scales which are developed by my research team. Next is, in some cases we talk about test translation, test adaptation. So, I would like to share with you how do we do translation as well as how do we adapt psychological tests. First of all, about test translation. We have very rigorous style to translate a test. We have 2 or 3 people who are doing translation at first level. So, maybe first translation by various people, then expert and translator group sit on that translation, then they think about it and they finalize this translation. Once they translation, for example, English to Hindi, once they translate and quite confident on this translation, then another group of people must translate it back to English. So, first back translation or second back translation, and then expert committee decide what is back translation, and then the scholar would compare the original sentences versus these back translated sentences. And I know when I translated this Connor Davidson's scale, I was working with Davidson, and he asked me various questions on this translated version and asked whether this particular word is synonym of this word in your culture. So that way they try to find out exact same meaning translated version, and then they develop approval, and once they finalize this translated version, that is not available to use for research purposes. Before that, you are supposed to study psychometric properties of this scale, and you have to establish these psychometric properties are good, and this scale is approvable to use. So, this is the way to translate a psychological test. For test revalidation, we just revalidate this scale through confirmatory factor analysis. In this direction, we have revalidated various scales. I think you can easily connect with our studies which I discussed with you. In these studies, we did study on demographic variables as well as we revalidated scales in Indian setting. For example, we revalidated this WHO quality of life scale in original version as well as Hindi version is with us. Original version means as it is English version, and translated in Hindi as well as we studied its psychometric properties. Scale of positive and negative experiences as well as flourishing scale, original as well as Hindi adaptation or Hindi translation version we worked on mental health in Hindi as well as in English, depression, anxiety, stress scale Hindi as well as English, Kenner Davidson resilience scale. Here I have highlighted this scale as per when we compare with other scales, because in these scales we just establish as it is factor solution, but here I observed that it is not confirmed in its original form, where scholars mentioned that 5 factor solution, and we rejected this 5 factor solution in our research, and then explored new factor solution, and finally we observed that 4 factor solution works better as compared to 5 factor solution. Then I think last year we published paper on Hindi version, and in Hindi version both of them is original factor solution as well as 4 factor solution which we established in Indian setting on English or on original version, and observed that both of them are okay, not very good confirmation we had, but 4 factor solution was working better as compared to 5 even in Hindi translated version. We have studied psychometric properties of grit, a short scale which has 8 items only, harmony in life scale and peace of mind scale. We translated here in Hindi because it's both of them are constructed by some Chinese scholars, and these are more appropriate in Asian cultures. Can say explanation of well-being in Asian cultures more in terms of harmony in life or peace of mind, and both scales were working properly, but in peace of mind in original version there are 7 items, 2 items negative items and 5 were positive items. When we revalidated here in Indian setting in Hindi, we observed that these 2 negative items are not working properly, and that is why we shorter this scale and saying that 5 items of peace of mind working properly, that is why we recommended to use these 5 items scale in Indian testing. So, when we revalidate, maybe revalidation is good as it is, but in some cases we take some extra precautions or can suggest something else, not exactly original mode of psychometric properties. Similarly, meaning in life scale we documented in Hindi as well as in English. psychometric properties of strengths and difficulties questionnaire we had. Value in action, character strengths I discussed during the character strengths chapter. In Hindi we said maybe one master virtue having almost all 24 character strengths. In English version we recommended 5 factor solution, not the 6 which is theoretical one. PERMA model in one scale where 15 items as it is was reflected in our study, but in another one I think this is Karen's scale where we shorter this psychological test. Similarly, mental well-being scale, NUPA scale we worked, and various other psychological tests we have adapted, we have studied as it is their psychometric properties and observed that working well. Along with this translation and revalidation, let us understand how do we adapt a psychological test. In adaptation, actually we change nature of the questions as per our culture. For example, I think this is best example which is from WHO quality of life scale. In the original scale, this item is how satisfied are you with your sex life. So, we observed that and scholars observed that this question is not suitable in Indian setting, and that is why this item was adapted and modified item was how satisfied are you with the respect you receive from others. So, because original item is not suitable to the culture, and that is why as per cultural expectation this item has been changed. So, this changed item is how satisfied are you with the respect you receive from others. And in this case actually we adapt first items which are not working in our culture, and again we are supposed to study psychometric properties of the scale before using it in our researches. So, from this section in brief we can say that in some cases some scales were validated in their original form. In some cases we proposed new factor solution. In some cases shorter version of a scale was proposed as some items were eliminated and these items were not appropriate in the study, and that is why eliminated shorter version which is working in the given situation was promoted in the research. Just a small point to get a little bit more clarity between exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis. In exploratory factor analysis we use SPSS and we put the whole data and see how factor solutions are reflecting in our research, and we try to match it with theory. We may eliminate number of items, or we can land up on say 3 factor solution, 4 factor solution, 5 factor solution, and we do trial and error again and again and try to find out most suitable factor solution which is matching with our theory. On the other hand, in confirmatory factor analysis or in when we revalidate the research, then the mode is totally different. In this case, we just go with the theory. For example, this scale is already established and our purpose is to revalidate or confirm this model. So, here we have used a statistical software, that is Liseral. In this case actually we are drawing all these things and we are saying that if we say interest, that is our first factor, and we are actually dragging these lines and drawing these lines and saying that this first factor has these 4 items and second factor has these 4 items. So, we actually draw these lines in the in this software, and along with our data set we enter this message and then finally we get results. In results we have certain norms and we compare our results with these norms and then finally say whether our model is good fit, moderate fit, or this confirmatory factor analysis is not good here. And if it is yes, then you can easily document your research. If it is not, then you reject this confirmation and can explore it again and can say, and the factor solution which was in the original research is not confirmed here, that is why you selected another factor solution. It happened in our resilience scale. So, Kenner-Davidson's resilience scale. So, first of all we try to confirm the model, 5-factor model, which is the original one, but we could not confirm it, the results were quite poor. So, then we just say we rejected this confirmation and now we would like to explore it once again in Indian setting, and then we did exploratory factor analysis. So, there are various ways, there are various solutions. So, as per your results you have to take one or second or third options, and whichever options you are taking you have to document. Now, another part in this section is psychological tests for Indian psychological constructs. This model has been taken from Spirituality and Indian Psychology, lessons from the Bhagavad Gita. This model, I think simplest explanation could be Kam, Krodh, Moh, Lobh, these are the vikaras which are reducing our well-being. On the other hand, there are various paths of yoga which may facilitate our well-being or happiness. For Indian understanding, that is good, but a hardcore mainstream psychologist would say, do you have empirical data? Can you prove it? So, for proving it we have to have some psychological test, and just to think about it we have developed various psychological tests on Sachidanand, on Anasakti, Sukh Dukh, Ashtanga Yoga, in which first 7 yogas, first 7 steps we have, excluding Samadhi. We have items on Dhyan, meditation, on Yam Niyam and all other Ang or Ashtanga Yoga, on all other domains. In Ashtanga Yoga scale, except Samadhi, we have items to test Ashtanga Yoga level on all except Samadhi. We have questions on all domains, Dhyan, Dharana, etc. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas scale, which was developed by David Wolf, validated by us in Indian setting as well as in Czech's data and US data, and we studied psychometric properties of this scale in all the 3 cultures. We have developed Vikara scales, Savadhyaya scale, and we would like to work on some other constructs if we observe these are really good to understand human nature. Let us understand how a psychological test define particular construct, or how a theory could define a particular construct. For example, we have worked on Sachidanand, and in this scale we finally concluded on 4 factor solutions, and explanation of these 4 factors are: first factor was Chit or consciousness, and it had 4 items. It is a full responsibility of one's thoughts, speech, feelings and action was part of these questions. Next factor was Antah Shakti or inner strength. It had 5 items, and these items capture the essence of taking initiative, executing one's plan with energy even in the face of challenges. Next was Sat or truthfulness. Items explanation were reflect the quality of feeling connected with the others and seeing goodness and positivity in nature and in other beings. Last factor was Anand or blissfulness, and there were 3 items. These items reflect the essence of attaining detachment and consequent bliss, captured in items of not being disturbed by thoughts, events and problems. So, to some extent I think you could understand our items are capturing Sachidanand as a construct through these items. So, that is the definition of Sachidanand for us. So, in this case operational definition of Sachidanand is that much only. If you have some other factors or some other explanation of Sachidanand, those are additional. not part of the psychological test. So, in psychological testing, you can say that is limitation also. When we are doing psychological testing, in this testing we are saying that operational definition of this construct is as per these selected items only, and we are excluding various other things which may be part of that construct. So, that is main limitation of psychological testing. We should understand these psychological testing styles or psychological testing ways as per their limitations only. Similarly, I have taken one another example on Vikaras scale which we have developed. Now, when we are saying Vikaras, we have observed these are the main factors which are describing Vikaras in the psychological test. For example, our first factor was Antrik Krodh or internalized anger. Krodh is the emotional or affective component of aggressive behavior, or at least of some kind of it. In this Antrik behavior, we had both type of factors here. Krodh was represented by two sets of factors. The factor represents internalized or mental expression of anger, with items measuring the tendency of a person to hold a grudge against someone who wronged him or her, crush someone internally rather than indulging in outward confrontation. It also has reverse statements related to forgiving people who have done wrong to a person. So, that this factor is combination of positive and negative items. If you have very low score on forgiving people, that is high on Krodh or internalized expression of Krodh. I am just skipping these values because these values are actually showing us how these properties, psychometric properties supporting valued factor number 1. Factor 2, moh, attachment. It includes statements related to materialism and attachment to worldly things and relations. The factor has 5 reverse scored items related to insignificance of material amenities, not having materialistic desire in life, etc. So, all questions were positive. If person has high score on these questions, then low moh he would be having. Similarly, some psychometric properties have been shown to establish this factor. Factor 3, that is Pratyaksh Krodh or externalized anger. This anger represents the tendency of exhibiting physical expression of anger. It has 5 items related to explicit use of foul language to express anger, indulgence in overt physical fighting with others, and these are some psychometric properties. Let us skip because that is not your objective to know. Factor 4 was lobh or grit. It is an extreme or excessive desire for resources, especially for property such as money, real estate or other symbols of wealth. Similarly, another factor was ahankar, pride or ego. So, it is one's possession or material wealth, desiring praise and authority over others. It has 5 items which are related to one's tendency to be boastful of one's accomplishments, being overindulgent in self, and the desire to be always in a position of authority over others. So, these are the explanations of ahankar. Factor 6 was kam or lust. It is Indian notion of pleasure, desire, passion with or without sexual connotations. It has 3 items related to attraction towards anatomical beauty, materialistic pleasure, etc. So, factor 7, tapas or apathy, it depicts self-centeredness, ignorance and laziness. The factor constitutes of 4 items describing the tendency of a person to be lazy in general, be just concerned about oneself. So, again I have given this example only just to share with you when I am saying vikaras as per this psychological test, then it means I am talking about these 7 factors having particular definitions, and definitions are highly connected with these items, and that is Vikara's meaning to me when I am using this psychological test. So, if someone is saying there could be some other explanations or other factors, so these factors are not part in my psychological test. That is why that is not part of operational definition, and we should understand psychological testing in reference to these factors only. So, from these explanations, our main points to learn are: there should be association between theory and test items of the scale, and we should understand these test items are capturing our behavior. That is why these test items are actually representing that theory. If there is gap between this theory and these test items, then limitation of your test, and this test is not very valid test. Second point is, in psychometric properties we study reliability and validity. Most of the time by using statistical analysis, that is correlation. This correlation is not based on all or none principle, yes or no, but that is matter of degree. For example, when we are saying that this scale is reliable at 0.07 level, then we are considering that this correlation is 0.7 or 70% only, 30% we are not claiming. Similarly, when we are saying construct validity and having certain correlation, this correlation may be 0.7, which is acceptable, which is counted good, but we know 30% correlation is not there. So, we should know limitation of psychological testing. Along with these psychological testing limitations, we must understand inherent limitations of the test as well as limitations of psychological testing. So, we know I think almost all research methods have their own limitations as well as strengths. So, similarly psychological testing also has its limitations, and we should understand results with this limitations background only. We may have various other research methods, and as per our research question, we should decide which research methodology will be the best one, and due weightage to all research methods we should give as per our research question or research design. Nandi in 1995 has argued that conducting experiments, developing and adapting psychological tests, mindlessly replicating Western research is what has kept Indian psychologists occupied without any clarity of purpose. So, I think this statement warns us to have purpose in our research, and we should know what is clear purpose of our research, as accordingly our research question and best research methodology as per our research question. We should know what it is and how we should proceed in research world. Method in Indian perspective work well within oneself, first person approach that is, and if your research question is more experiential one, then one could choose first person approach. For research in Indian psychology, sophisticated first person methods are the nature first choice. In term of application, Indian psychology aims primarily at the mastery and transformation of oneself. It puts personal experience or anubhav about traditions. So, again I am repeating, or as per this Indian psychological mode, if you observe your research question needs more experiential thoughts or anubhav, then one could go with such kind of methodology. Another one is second person approach, can say Guru Shishya discourses or discussions. For example, Guru Shishya discussions for some ultimate questions. For example, Sri Krishna Arjun's discourses could be part of our research or understanding human behavior. Generally, the methodology of Western psychology focuses on the study of the other person, third person approach. So, Indian psychology, as other Eastern psychologies, focuses on the study of oneself or on self. So, this is main difference between first person and third person approach. So, Western methodology or Western psychology focusing more on third person, and this side it is more on oneself or on self. We need both first person and third person approach to research to bring about desired changes in human societies. Thus, the Indian thought system have experiential cognitive basis. Methodologically speaking, adhyan or study, savadhyay self study, abhyas practice, anubhuti experiencing, and praman or demonstration are important ingredients of any study. So, as per your research question, you could see study or adhyan or savadhyay, self study, practice, anubhuti or praman or demonstration, which aspects are more important in your research questions, and accordingly you could decide what kind of research you want to do. So, we have to have broader basket of our research methods. Methods of yoga and meditation have been used for centuries to test, experiment and empirically validate higher mental states. First person, second person and third person approach, when we compare and discussed about them, then Professor Bhauk and Professor Kumar's statements is, as a science of a multi-layering being comprising of subtle inner being, physical being and social being. Its propositions could not be tested by the accepted empirical methods of inquiry alone, but require a broad spectrum of methodologies, calling for a wise and balanced deployment of first person, second person and third person perspectives. So, again these statements focused on all perspectives, whether that's first, second or third person approach. The primary focus is on how people can lead a purposeful and wholesome life. Both knowledge of the self or pravidya and apravidya, empirical knowledge, are considered necessary to live a harmonious life in this world. So, knowledge of self as well as empirical knowledge, both are important for our research. Thank you. I will keep this topic continue in the next class.